Sponsored by the Big 98, Nashville's #1 for new country and the home of the Bobby Bones Show.
We're so pleased to have on the show author, photographer, documentarian, also oral historian with the blues, Margo Cooper. Margo, thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, Eric, thanks for giving me the opportunity to join you on Zoom. As I said earlier, I wish I could be in Nashville. Never been to Nashville, but one of these days.
You need to come visit. You know, we've got a little bit of music too. And I mean, it's nice to be talking about your new book, Deep Inside the Blues. You know, and I got to tell you, I've really enjoyed going through this, Margo, and I want to throw some questions at you about it. But essentially 34 interviews, 160 photos. This is like 30 years of your life in the making. So, you know, I mean, how did all of this come together finally?
Well, I mean, it's my journey goes back to probably the 70s, early 70s, the path that led to this journey when I heard Buddy Guy's and Junior Wells' song Messin' with the Kid. And it was like, man, it was like lightning struck. It was just so exciting to hear. I mean, Junior's vocals, the harp, Buddy Guy's guitar playing. I mean, you can't sit still when you hear that song. And that planted the seed. It took me a while to get to where I could really actively get involved with the blues. You know, I went to college, worked, law school, and then I was a public defender for 6 years in New Hampshire. And then I took a year off and started taking photography classes, a year off from the practice of law, and started taking photography classes. And by 1993, I was going into the blues clubs. The House of Blues, the first House of Blues was in Cambridge, Massachusetts. We had Harper's Ferry in Allston, Johnny D's in Somerville, the Rhineborn in Antrim. I mean, there were, you know, Boston and the area had always been sort of a vibrant blues scene, but it was still hopping in the 90s. And a lot of the Chicago musicians were coming through. So,
sure. You know, I think what a great job you did also with the book on this, Margo, is to where not only did you hit, you know, the big names that, you know, so many of us know, you know, in the blues world and even outside of it, you know, such as, you know, B.B. King and Honeyboy and Pinetop and all those, but also you covered a lot of blues artists in your book that people may not be aware of, but should be aware of.
Thank you. And that was part of the incentive for, doing the book. But that, you know, I didn't go when I went to, so in the early 90s, I was meeting Willie Big Eye Smith, Muddy's drummer for 20 years. Obviously Calvin Fuzz Jones, you know, the bass player for Muddy. Luther had by that time already settled in New England, and he was living outside Boston, Lynn, and then at the time I met him up in Antrim, New Hampshire. But, you know, I was meeting these guys and they're personable and friendly, and to hear the music, you know, it was like, wow, what's the story behind the music? I'm loving it, but there's a deeper story. And also, you know, most of the people coming through, you know, grew up in the South, most of them in Mississippi. And obviously, you know, I was thinking, oh my God, these guys were alive when there was sharecropping, Jim Crow. What was that like? I need to go to Mississippi.
Right. Well, and, you know, and also on it, Margo, not only did you cover Mississippi artists, but also Helena, Arkansas. And as you brought up Chicago, you know, and so many great, you know, artists, you know, having their own circuit, you know, through the South. But the photography is just so riveting. I mean, such natural shots. I mean, not only, you know, obviously with, you know, B.B. King at Club Ebony with his Lucille, but then also you've got musicians, you know, playing in churches, you know, you got them playing on the porch, playing in houses. It's like, it's so connecting the music with the photography and the articles in here, Margo.
Well, thank you for saying that. I mean, that's part of the beauty of, documentary photography is it's not short term. And in my instance, and I'm continuing to go to Mississippi today. I think we're on year 26. My first trip was in 1997, and I was at the West Point Festival. So there was the scene on stage, but then the next day there I met Annie Eggerson in her home, and I was David Nelson, the editor of Living Blues, had suggested I go to Other Turner's that Saturday, and there was his Fife and Drum Festival, the Goat Picnic, and then I would keep going, but I would go where the music was, where the people were.
Right. And also, you were a contributor for Living Blues magazine for so long, and also, your work has been published, in the New York Times, rave reviews. And I got to bring up also, it's not a bad thing when William R. Ferris, writes the foreword for your book and also gives you a blurb for the back of it. That's not a bad thing, Margo.
I was deeply honored. I mean, Bill Ferris is somebody I look up to, and what a magnificent job he has done, both in his film, photography, recordings of artists in Mississippi. We are very lucky to have his work, and the Voices of America that came out in a CD and won a Grammy, and he's continuing to feature those artists in shows as we speak.
Well, and with this book too, with Deep Inside the Blues, photographs and interviews, Margo, what are you hoping that readers gain from this when they sit down with it, when they immerse themselves in these interviews, the 34 interviews, the 160 photos as we discussed? What are you hoping they come away with?
Well, I hope they, as I say in the book, to me, remembering is a duty, a sacred duty. And so I felt these people I knew many of these people over many, many years. Right. And they gave me the time, many of them sitting down with me, sharing their stories, which we worked together to then shape into the stories for Living Blues in their own words, as I thought it was very important to have these stories, to preserve these stories, and in the words of the artists.
And so many of these artists also, Margo, unfortunately, we both know have passed away.
Correct.
Since you did these in-person, interviews and the great photography as well. So it's really a testimony and a tribute to many of the artists that have left that are, no longer around. To, as you and I talked before we started discussing the book, that, it's such a work of joy for someone like yourself to do this, but also you want some of the artists to be around to see it in print,
Absolutely. But, so why is it important? I mean, the stories, many were published in Living Blues, but I felt a wider audience needed to know these stories about American history, Southern history, culture, music. And because some of the musicians were born in the 20s and 30s, also for blues lovers, you're learning about history of the music over a 100-year period. Who was Elsie Ulmer listening to, playing with, and Willie Big Eye Smith, and you get that through these stories. So hopefully that will lead people to listen to the musicians who inspired them, as well as, okay, let me go check out Elsie Ulmer's recording, or Willie Smith's recording, Luther's recording, go back to Sam Carr and the Jelly Roll Kings. People may forget if the next generation doesn't continue to talk about them or play their music. But
I totally agree. And you look at an artist like Bobby Rush, who's been on our show in the past, and only in the past 5 years has Bobby started getting Grammys and awards, which he just got another Grammy this year for his albums. But I mean, there's an artist that toured with, B.B. King and Bobby Blue Bland, who is in his later years in life is now finally hitting it big, Margo.
Well, and he always, I remember seeing Bobby in the 90s at the House of Blues in Cambridge. And, I actually, the first trip to Mississippi in 1997, he was playing at a small outside place, Bryant's Farm. And, he wanted to cross over. He wanted to succeed, and God love him, he has. And I watched through the years. I mean, in Mississippi, you watch how several generations, you're at a show and grandmothers are singing along with Bobby. They're with their daughters, their granddaughters. Bobby always took the time to meet people, greet people, take photographs, have them take photographs with him. He's beloved. And I just saw him in New Hampshire and Massachusetts while he was on tour this winter. And God love him, I mean, he was nonstop on stage, singing, playing his harp, talking, walking down to greet the audience. It's wonderful to experience. And again, as you're saying, I mean, he's the one we can turn to for stories about the old guys.
Right.
He was there.
Keep that alive, and I couldn't help but think while I was going through your book also, Margo, and once again, I'm sure it was hard for you to choose 34 stories and to only choose, 160 of your great photos, but it seems like this would make a great documentary also, down the road, in your spare time.
I hear you. I agree. I mean, when people shared their stories with me, I mean, I could see it visually. When Sam Carr, when I asked him, why did you leave Mississippi? And he told me the story of how the boss man was, because of he had stood up to the boss man, he was told that they were going to come down to where he was living that night. So he and his wife Doris by bicycle went across to Helena. His father, Robert Nighthawk, was living in Helena, and they escaped basically, and they went on a train to St. Louis because he feared being killed. When Cadillac John told me a story about he gave a ride to a white farmer neighbor, and he just asked for the gas money. And when he gave the guy a ride back, he asked again for the money, and he didn't get it. And later that night, he talks about how the cars were lined up in front of where he was living, like a funeral home, and he had to go out the back, crawl through the cornfields to get his boss man. I mean, we don't need to make these, these are the true stories of people who lived it. And it's, yes, I would love to see a documentary.
Yeah, it's so historical and such incredible work, Margo. And I want to make sure for our viewers also, I know you're going to be, out at some festivals and doing, talks on the book, and also hopefully doing some readings and having the books with you for autographs as well. But I know the book is available everywhere on Amazon, and people can get it at their bookstores and everything. But it's just, I think it's always fun to have, an author like yourself to sign the book, just to have that extra level of it. But it's such a great book. And and with your website and social media too, with all of the things you're going to be doing, involving Deep Inside the Blues, where should our viewers go, Margo?
Well, my website is margocooper.com, and events and book reviews are listed there, as well as some of my photographs. I will be down at Juke Joint Festival in Clarksdale, Mississippi, which is a wonderful opportunity for people to see a lot of blues artists over 3 or 4 days, outside, inside clubs. And I will be doing a book event check in with Roger Stoley at Cathead. He's going to set me up on a date there, and the following week at University of Mississippi in Oxford, I'm doing an event with Joe and Trenton Ayers.
I think you should just, Margo, I think you should treat this like a gig and just make this a tour of all the incredible blues museums. I mean, such as in St. Louis, obviously in Indianola, you know, the BB King's. I mean, you could just do, you know, just have some fun with it, and then have some great food while you're there too. You know, I'm just saying you can make that circuit, you know.
All right. Well, why don't you book me?
I think I can make that. I know.
I'll hire you. You're hired.
Well, I'll tell you what, I can't say how much I enjoy this book, you know, and with your stories and the photographs really bring it to life. And you can hear the voices of these artists, particularly, you know, for people like you and myself that have listened to the blues so much and have immersed ourselves in it. It's a great tribute. And I think everybody's going to want a copy of this one. If you're a blues fan, if you're a music fan, if you're just a fan of history, Margo, you did a great job on this, deep inside the blues. Margo Cooper, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you very much for inviting me, and I hope I'll see you somewhere down the road.
I think you definitely will. Thanks, Margo.
All right. Have a great day.
Sponsored by the Big 98, Nashville's #1 for new country and the home of the Bobby Bones Show.